power on.
Now entering the gaming grid. The latest gaming news, reviews, and retro culture, as only the man of tomorrow can deliver. And here is your host, Brian Sodlin.
It has been a little bit, but it is time for the gaming grid. And this is, man, I love doing this show because even though sometimes it seems like I have to come out screaming and howling on this one, this is the show where I can talk about the good shit going on, or most of the good shit. Actually, the end of this episode, I've got some stuff to complain about. Does that surprise anybody? No. Do I have the solution? Well, sort of, but anyway, we'll save it for that. But we have a lot to get into in this episode. In fact, a lot to walk away with for you to already start rocking and playing. And I mean, some really, really cool shit. But let's open this baby up with, well, I mean, I could open it up complaining because Stadia, Google Stadia, which we have on this very show, on the Gaming Grid, on Zomia 1, we have talked about how it is going to be, no pun, I mean, pun intended, but really, I mean it, an absolute game changer. The funny thing is that it's failed out of the gate. Stadia has run into, multiple issues as far as a cloud gaming platform. I shared a tweet a good while back when it was first launched, where I think it was a guy, maybe it was a guy with the Washington Post or something, but he was showing where he was pressing the jump key on his keyboard, USB keyboard, hooked up and everything. And there was a delay of at least a second or two. I mean, unacceptable delays in a first-person shooter game where it took the time for the character to jump in the game playing Google Stadia on a, very powerful internet connection, at least a gigabit. So that's a problem, right? I mean, and there's so many other issues going on with it. Now they're giving away some games because they've changed the structure, or they're giving refunds for games because they changed the structure of how they're going to release games. I mean, it is just a clusterfuck. But we're not here to talk about that. Okay, Google Stadia, we're going to keep covering it because let's be clear here that even good old Reggie Fils-Aimé, who was previously the head of Nintendo of America for eons, it seems, of course now being run by Bowser himself, Doug Bowser, I should say. But I love the fact that the president of Nintendo of America, his last name is Bowser. There's a perfection there. We all know it. But anyway, Reggie, he was basically saying that he thought cloud gaming was the future. Now, that's not a surprise, and we're going to talk a little bit of cloud gaming here in a minute, because, a prediction that I've made on the Gaming Grid for some time is that we are really looking at the last generation of consoles. And in fact, I think even the Nintendo Switch, while there might be a Nintendo Switch Pro that will come down the line, or something along the lines of how there was a new Nintendo 3DS, there will be a new Nintendo Switch or a new Nintendo Switch Lite, whatever. But that this is basically, it's a prediction and I can be wrong, but I think this is going to be the last hardware, and Switch Online is going to end up becoming the premier way that you play games. And like we said, and I think I've done this on Zomia 1 Underground content on the Q&As. I've done this also on this show. And we're going to talk about some Switch news, including Switch Online news here in a minute. Okay. But really the magic that Nintendo pulled off with the Switch is it's basically a tablet. Okay. It's a tablet computer with really great controls. In fact, very adaptable controls, because so I actually ended up getting my hands on a full-size Switch because, well, for one, I want to rock some 2-player with Ellen, but for two, there's just, the amount of things that you can do with a full-size Switch, and I know I talked about this on Zomia 1 Underground content, it's pretty remarkable how versatile this device really is. I mean, I still recommend the Switch Lite, no problem, especially if you're more of a, one person affair, shall we say. You're not going to be sharing it with anybody, or maybe you have a bunch of buddies who all have Switches, whatever the situation being. Yeah, man, I mean, I could do an updated review of the Switch Lite, but really, when you do hook it up to a television and you start going to town on it, and the fact that the Joy-Cons adapt so well to being the controllers for so many games, and in fact, Nintendo, if you are a Switch Online subscriber, Nintendo was offering, I don't know if they still are, but they were offering, you could get, because they released, and some people thought that these were dumb. I have to disagree with you. In fact, I could do a review of these right here. You can get, again, only if you're a Switch Online subscriber, you get access to, in the Nintendo store, you can buy the NES replica controllers, Joy-Cons effectively, but NES replica controllers, and there are Super Nintendo replica controllers. Now, the Super Nintendo replicas have been out of stock for about as long as they've existed. The NES or the NES replica controllers, Joy-Cons, that you can get for the Switch, Nintendo somehow got a crazy stock of them, and they basically sold them for half off for the holidays. So, you could pick them up. Normally they're $60. You could pick up two NES controllers, replica controllers, for $30. I did get my hands on those, and they are fucking brilliant and fucking awesome. In fact, we'll talk more about those when we talk about our Switch Online update news. But I bring that up just to talk about the versatility of this machine. And those controllers, I mean, this is another reason that, because I found myself playing classic NES games and really Super Nintendo games so much. Now you can separately, I mean, because here's the weird thing, right? The way to charge a Joy-Con is you have to connect it to the Nintendo Switch, right? So if you have a Switch Lite, you're actually kind of screwed, because, I mean, there are, you can buy, and I have one, you can buy charging towers that will charge Joy-Cons separately. Okay, like say if you have 4 Joy-Cons, you can charge them all separately. But really, I mean, that's adding a lot to your desk. And if you're wanting to be really portable, I think it just makes more sense to have your Joy-Cons get charged by the Switch itself. And you can do that even with the NES controllers, which you can actually, they can do some pretty special things when you have them connected directly to the tablet end, shall we say, of the Switch. I mean, and they work so great because, well, again, we'll talk about it. I know we're going to get into this when we talk about the Switch Online news that came throughout December of 2019. So I'll save it for that. But speaking of something, let's get into this. Speaking of something that unfortunately is delayed, we were originally expecting these to come out on January 21st, 2020. Now they are being backed up to, I want to say, is it February 25th? Got the story right here. Yeah, they're backed up to February 25th, that being the Legacy Collection, which we announced in the last episode of the Gaming Grid. The Legacy Collection for Mega Man Zero and Mega Man ZX, or it's the Mega Man Zero/ZX Legacy Collection. So this is a great collection to have all of the Metroid, or I said the Metroid. Did I say Metroid earlier? I hope I didn't. Anyway, to have all of the Mega Man Zero games in one collection, and the 2 ZX games, which Mega Man ZX and Mega Man ZX Advent, as I said when they first announced this, really, they were one of the... I still have the cartridges of those. They are originally for the DS, just like some of the Mega Man Zero games. And, I mean, it's one of the reasons I have a 3DS, is because I love those games. Those games are so solid. They are very much the perfect Mega Man games. In the vein of where I think Mega Man 6 is a perfect Mega Man game. Mega Man X3 is a perfect Mega Man game. We get very few, like, there are just odd points within the Mega Man saga, okay, within the franchise, where you end up with a game that just feels fucking perfect. Not too much bloat as far as abilities. The enemies are of the right challenge level, shall we say, and so on. For example, I mean, you think of like Mega Man 9 and 10, which are kind of flukes to even have ever existed, But those games are painfully hard. In fact, way too hard. And they stripped a lot of the cool abilities that Mega Man had, like the ability to dash and some other things. And I thought that kind of stunk. So just because something is higher up in, or is the latest game in the Mega Man series, doesn't necessarily mean that it's a great Mega Man game or that it's better or anything like that. Of course, we know that from many video game franchises. But I would put, I think Mega Man 3 is also a perfect Mega Man game. But I would put 3, 6, X3, and ZX Advent, maybe 0-2. I would say those are probably like the perfect Mega Man games where you're just in for a great time. Anybody can actually beat them. Okay, I mean, it's better if you're more skilled with these games and have a lot of backstory with them, but these are games that you can just take on and go. Not to say that ZX and ZX Advent aren't fucking hard. They fucking are. And you're going to find out on February 25th when these finally do come out. And I know they're available up for pre-order already in the Switch eShop. And of course, they're coming out for much more than just the Nintendo Switch. They are also coming out for, everything. PS4, Xbox One, and Steam. So you'll be able to get your hands on it in just about any console you happen to have or a computer. But yeah, this is a real treat. I really can't wait. I mean, if they are taking the time to release these, great. Like I'm if you want to do it right, and that's basically, what Sochiya-san said, who is running the Mega Man series right now. He basically said, hey, we wanted you to have the best experience possible. Okay, take the time. That's okay. I mean, it's better than us having to wait a fucking year. I'll take a month off. I don't exactly understand it. Maybe it has something to do with production of physical copies. I'm not sure. But regardless, if it's about the best experience possible, yeah, please give it to me. And in fact, right now, really ever since Black Friday in November of 2019, the amount of sales that have been held, at least on the Nintendo Switch and the Switch eShop, and of course the Steam sales are going on, all kinds of sales are going on because of the holidays. You can get all of the Mega Man games, as in all of the Legacy collections, Mega Man Legacy 1 and 2, Mega Man X Legacy 1 and 2, and including Mega Man 11, okay, which was a phenomenal game in my opinion. You can get all of those for like half off. So you could spend not even $50 and more or less get every Mega Man game ever made on a modern platform. And you could be rocking that until, the Zero ZX collection comes out. And you're in for a great time if you've never played them. We're talking about literally some of the greatest games and some of the most perfect games ever developed for any system. And they still play really fresh. In fact, just a few minutes ago, I was playing Mega Man 3, come to think of it. So I was just waiting for, waiting to get behind the microphone and make it happen. So all of that said, there you go. February 25th. We do have a delay on that. It was one of the most exciting game releases, in my opinion, in some time, even though, yes, it's a re-release. But it was worthwhile to bring up and just so you know what's happening with that. And you're probably following it anyway. Are you kidding me? If you're listening to this show, it's a pretty good bet you're into retro games if you're listening to the show and you're keeping your eye on some of that hot news. But just in case, I got you covered. Anyway, let's switch off from, no pun intended there, from that. And that is, let's talk about the new games. And this was the announcement that was done. There was a bit of a... did I talk about this? Maybe I talked about this on an Underground episode. But there was a bit of a flub where the Nintendo Twitter account basically tweeted out that, hey, you could play F-Zero, and they showed a picture of it. And everybody responded under it saying, how about you release some new fucking games for Switch Online, which hasn't gotten any love? And then within about 24 hours, Nintendo did exactly that. Now, they made us wait a couple weeks before the actual games that they announced would come out. But they did that. Did they do that in response to that? Probably. Because, that was some pretty ugly backlash, and deserved backlash, because originally we were getting monthly releases. At least, once a month, we would get some kind of... Now, in September of this year, this is how greedy we Nintendo fans are. In September of this year, we got the announcement about Super Nintendo games for Switch Online. Before that, you just had NES games on Switch Online that you could play, and they were getting monthly releases. But when they announced that we'd get SNES games on it, Then they said, okay, and we're also canceling monthly releases. But then it turned, 2-3 months and we weren't getting any new games. And it's like, all right, yeah, we know that SNES Online is there, but could we please get some new fucking games? Now, in September, and we talked about this on the Gaming Grid, in September, when they announced that they were actually, I think it was in August maybe that they officially announced it, but when it was announced that they were going to have SNES games available for Switch Online, we didn't know what games we were going to get. And I had said it would be a no-brainer to release Star Fox 2 on Switch Online. Because, make it something that where it's a game you can only get there. And I think this speaks to an overall conversation to have around this and to have around cloud gaming. Because Switch Online games, while they do, as I understand it, they do temporarily store in the Switch system memory. That way, if you do end up offline, you can still keep playing it, but it doesn't store all the games there. Even though, let's be clear here, they're NES games and SNES games. There's really no reason that they can't, all be there. But regardless, I said the smartest thing that they can do is put Star Fox 2 on there. Put a game on there that there's just that's the only place, minus the SNES Classic, right, which I reviewed on Sovereign Tech years ago when it came out. I got my hands on one. That was the only place you could play it. And now, make the Switch the complete system that allows for that, especially considering how hard it is to get Nintendo's mini consoles. And finally, again, for December, and these are all available now. There was a total of 6 games that ended up getting released. Okay, again, they don't do the monthly release cycle anymore, so we get a bunch of them at a time and whatever. I'm more or less okay with that as long as they do it with some kind of frequency. Even if it's quarterly, just fucking give us the games. They did finally put Star Fox 2 on Switch Online. It's just a brilliant move. There's no reason for that game not to be there. In fact, I'm impressed that more or less Switch Online now has every Super FX game available on there, which includes games like Stunt Racer. Was it Stunt Racer FX? That was not made available on the SNES Classic. So it's the right move. I thought that was a good touch. That was definitely the biggest announcement out of this bunch. But as far as for the SNES goes, we also got Breath of Fire 2, which adds on to Breath of Fire, which was already available on Switch Online as it released. Kirby Superstar. Well, all right, let me get to that in a second. Super Punch-Out is another one available for Switch Online. That's a fine game. Great choice, great option to have there. Of course, the original Punch-Out, not Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, which will never get re-released because they'd have to pay Mike Tyson just a butt ton of money, but whatever. I still find, it's funny because I still find myself calling it Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, even to this day. I don't think that'll ever change because I'm so used to playing it that way. But Punch-Out is more, other than, Switch's Mr. Dream for Mike Tyson, it's the same game. And Super Punch-Out, of course, never had a association deal, which was probably a smart move on Nintendo's part. But Super Punch-Out, the sequel, it's just a classic game. Great, great game. So, these are Star Fox 2. Of course, I have played that. I played that on the SNES Classic. Badass game. So you got a great game there. Breath of Fire 2 is a great game. Super Punch-Out is a great game. And to round out what got released of the 6 for the SNES part of Switch Online, we have Kirby Superstar. Now, here's the rub with this, okay? Kirby Superstar is a great collection of minigames. Kirby is one of my favorite characters from Nintendo, right up there with Link. And, you can see pictures, actually, of the old BDSM studio that I recorded out of, and you can see Kirby in the background. And basically Kirby and Samus, that's all you saw there. I love Kirby so much. Now, Kirby Superstar is, in many ways, the quintessential Kirby game. The thing is, there are better versions of Kirby Superstar out there. And you had the re-release of Kirby Superstar, which was called Kirby Superstar Ultra, which got re-released for the DS, over a decade ago. And the thing is that I think Kirby Superstar Ultra really does add a lot to that game. So it's nice that it's there for free. I don't know what really... there are some things... So here's the challenge, right? And in fact, this speaks to a few things. And I know the Wii U could do this. Because remember, the Wii U had, basically the Wii U had the Switch built into it, more or less, right? Because you had the tablet controller, but it only worked more or less on the TV, even though you could bring it down. I mean, it's funny. People think the Switch is so revolutionary, but the Wii U really was. And look, I wasn't interested in the Wii U. It's the first Nintendo console since, more or less since the NES, that I had no interest in and I didn't buy. Like, I thought it was just way too iterative for my taste. And Nintendo, its boldness is what makes Nintendo great. It really is. So I skipped the Wii U entirely, but really the Wii U already had the elements of the Switch in it. Just basically, I mean, really, if you think about it, the Nintendo Switch is just the Wii U in reverse, right? But the Wii U, with the Virtual Console on there, which is one of its best offerings, did have DS games on it. Now, DS games are unique because you need to have the dual screen, right? That's what DS stands for. And so you need to have the lower screen where, you use the whatever stylus, or if you just happen to use your fingers or something. There are elements of Kirby Superstar Ultra that require that lower screen. Now, I think you could get away with that, especially, I mean, the challenge you're going to run into, and I wouldn't be surprised if this ended up being part of like some kind of Switch Pro hardware. Okay, as in the Switch Pro that everybody's been talking about for a long time, where you can more or less wirelessly transmit to a TV screen, and you don't actually need the dock. I mean, you could have the dock, but maybe it would be more optional. Okay. And the reason I say this is because if you had the TV screen and you had the Switch screen in your hand where you could take advantage of, like DS style games, then that gets interesting. I mean, the other thing you could do is you could actually take your Switch in handheld mode and hold it like an Atari Lynx, where the game system was meant to be played vertically instead of horizontally. Then you could create two screens. I mean, I think there's some options with that where I think this sort of thing could be, because the DS has such a great library of games. And it's also, again, one of the reasons, and I know you can emulate it, folks. I know you can, don't worry. But it's also one of the reasons I hold on to my 3DS, is because it plays DS games like a dream. And I have the cartridges. I have the cartridge. I'm actually looking at the cartridge for Kirby Superstar Ultra right there. So I bring this up for a few reasons, because there's other games that got re-released especially for the DS, but then also for the 3DS, that were updated versions from their systems. For example, you have Super Mario 64, one of the greatest games of all time. You have Super Mario 64 DS. The DS version adds in characters, it adds in all kinds of stuff. It is the best way to play that game, and the most fun. It fixes a lot of things, just like actually Angry Video Game Nerd. He did a review of Majora's Mask in a particularly long episode, and a great one, of course, that he did recently, again, of Angry Video Game Nerd. And in that, he was doing Majora's Mask, and he mentions how a lot of the frustrations, and you know how funny it is when James gets frustrated, he mentioned how some of the frustrations that he had actually were fixed in the version for the 3DS, and they are. Like, I knew even when I was watching the episode, it's like, oh, well, they fixed that in the 3DS version. And this is the thing, is that eventually, Switch Online is probably, as we've predicted, and this is going to get into the cloud gaming conversation, we still have more games to talk about here, but eventually, Switch Online is probably going to have Nintendo 64 games, it's going to have Game Boy games, it might even have GameCube games, it would make sense if it had Wii U games, frankly, okay? I mean, and look, the Switch, like on the, what is it, on the right Joy-Con, has like the little IR sensor that could probably be used, or, I mean, it wouldn't be hard, basically, to use a Wii, to sell a Wiimote that would work with the Nintendo Switch. I mean, it worked with the Wii U, there's really no reason for it not to work with, just like there are GameCube controllers officially produced and sold by Nintendo, okay, that work with a little bit of USB adaptation, that work with the Switch. So my point in saying this is that eventually a lot of Nintendo's, like Kirby Superstar, Nintendo's back catalog with other systems beyond the NES and SNES, which are the only options available with Switch Online right now. Eventually these other systems are going to come into play. But why would I want to play inferior versions? This is the argument that goes back to, oh, are they going to come out with the N64 classic next? No, I hope not, because the 3D versions, and not because of the 3D, just the enhancements that they've made, the improvements to gameplay, just the ability to save at different points and all this stuff. The enhancements that they've made to classic Nintendo 64 games for the DS and for the 3DS. Okay, again, Super Mario 64 DS, Star Fox 64 3D for the 3DS, both N64 Zelda games for the 3DS. The enhancements to these games are really, I mean, they're so important and they so improve the gameplay. I'm not interested in playing the original versions of these things. And when they introduced Kirby Superstar, I mean, yeah, Ultra didn't add that much, but what it did add was a lot of replayability. And so it's actually disappointing to play the original version. And I ran into the same situation with the SNES Classic, which also had this game on it. So it's fine that it got added. I get it. But eventually Nintendo's got to resolve this issue where they have done far superior re-releases of some of their classics. And those are the versions that people should play and that I want to play and want to have available. Of course, I mean, maybe that's why the 3DS is still for sale. I don't know. But I mean, especially where it's really noticeable is with the Zelda games and with Star Fox 64. When you go back to the original versions, I mean, they are so much night and day, and there's so many nice enhancements to the new versions. I don't know if I want to go there, but we'll see. I wouldn't expect the next system for Switch Online really to get announced until next fall, when they need to push some more hardware, perhaps. Even though, I mean, the Switch is literally the fastest selling game system of all time, which is incredible. But, well, we'll see. Anyway, Kirby Superstar, I mean, it's a fine addition. Just understand, like, it's a little disappointing because there is a far superior version of this game available out there. But if you already have a 3DS, if you're a Nintendo fanboy, you probably already have it anyway. And if you're not, then maybe, frankly, you won't care. I don't know. So that rounds out what was made available for the SNES part of Switch Online. Now, there were 2 games released for the NES part, or for the NES games available on Switch Online. There was 2 added. One is Journey to Silius, which I have never played. It looks a lot of fun. Sci-fi game, looks cool. The other is one of my favorite games of all time. And in fact, one of the reasons that I mean, this is the one game, this is one of those games that put me over the edge to get a Nintendo Switch. Not because it was available on Switch Online. And this is where there's a conversation to be had. Okay. But because it was available in a compilation that was only available at the time on the Nintendo Switch. The game is Crystalis, or Crystalis, depending upon who you talk to, the way they want to pronounce it. This is one of the games that I wish, if the 3DS had it on their for Virtual Console, without question, the 3DS would be the greatest RPG system of all time, without question. But it wasn't available there. It felt like a weird omission, especially since clearly Nintendo got permission from SNK, who are the developers of it, to release it on Switch Online. And it's doubly weird because this game is available in all of its beautiful glory on the SNK 40th Anniversary Collection, which is a completely separate game, doesn't require to be online, or you don't need Switch Online for it or anything, for the Nintendo Switch. And in fact, it was one of the first games I picked up for the Nintendo Switch. And I picked it up mainly because, there's other great games on there. Akari Warriors, there's a bunch of great shit on there, no doubt. But Crystalis was definitely the game I wanted to play. And because I think that it might be the only game of Zelda's ilk. Okay, it is a Zelda-esque game that actually is better than The Legend of Zelda. And I stand by that statement all the way. I think this is, it was one of the last games to come out for the NES back in the day, but it is one of its best. Just like Mega Man 6 was one of the last games for the NES, but it's one of the best in the series. And if somebody thought it was the best, I wouldn't argue with them too much. So it's kind of weird that Crystallis is available basically in two places on the Nintendo Switch. And I mean, I got to tell you, I'm still going to play it on my SNK 40th Anniversary Collection because that doesn't require an online connection at any given point. And also, you know, one thing to understand about the NES controllers, the replica controllers that are supposed to be made for NES or for Switch Online, those do work with games outside of Switch Online, and they do work beautifully with Crystallis in the SNK 40th Anniversary Collection. So they're worthwhile having for that. But that's the way I want to play that game. Okay, is because it's always available. It doesn't require me, again, to have a subscription. It is, again, always available offline. There's a lot of interesting history in the SNK 40th Anniversary Collection. You get a lot more with it to experience everything about Crystallis, the game. The SNK 40th Anniversary Collection is one of the, in my opinion, an absolutely essential own title for the Nintendo Switch. I mean, it's that good. The amount of games that you get, the different versions of the games that you get, and all of the, what they call the museum aspects of it, where it's just all these promotional materials, all this extra stuff that you get to do around the games available for that. I mean, it is a must-have, in my opinion, if you're a retro gamer at all. It is a beautiful collection. If you're not going to put down the money for that, well, I mean, then one of the greatest really RPGs or action RPGs, again, think of it, it's much like the original Legend of Zelda. One of the best action RPGs of all time is now available on Switch Online, which makes that a much more interesting proposition. This is a game that, yes, if you, for whatever reason, if you're on the fence around whether or not you should buy, you know, SNK 40th Anniversary Collection or get a Switch Online account, if you're that strapped, and hey, I can understand that. If you are, I mean, this is definitely something that makes the Switch Online subscription worthwhile and worth its price alone. It's that good of a game. So that was a nice addition. I'm still kind of confused that it's available on Switch Online, and I mean, because even so, if you get the Konami collections, okay, which, you know, there's the Castlevania collection, there's the Contra collection, and then there's the Arcade Classics collection. For example, that doesn't come with Gradius for you know, like the NES versions of Gradius and Life Force. It comes with the arcade versions of them, but you know, the NES versions, actually the NES version of Life Force is not on Switch Online, which I think is kind of weird because there's multiple versions of Gradius on there, but that's a shame because I actually like the NES version of Life Force more than I like the arcade version, even though, you know, whenever Ellen and I go to Fun Spot, we always got to crank out some Life Force. It's our favorite game. But regardless, you know, that's a weird fact that that's not on Switch Online. But my point being is that, like, why double up on releases of games? Like, I get it why Gradius is on, the NES versions are on Switch Online. Of course, they're classic Nintendo games. But then, or, you know, NES games. But then why the fuck weren't, you know, if you're willing to release them on both, I mean, why isn't it on the Arcade Classics collection where you could switch between the versions? It's just kind of strange. Anyway, what I do think this all ultimately points to is that, I mean, especially since there are games where you can buy a Switch game, like the SNK 40th Anniversary, right? But then it's also available on Switch Online, kind of points to where all this is going, right? Everything's going to Switch Online, and sooner or later, like I was talking about earlier, sooner or later, the hardware, you know, again, Reggie Fils-Aimé, when he was talking about that he thought cloud gaming was the future, I mean, I think he's pointing at, he knows what Nintendo's still doing. And that they're looking to go in that direction. Is that all of this stuff, and yeah, of course, it's easy to do it with, you know, a game that is lucky if it's a megabyte. It's just a few kilobytes, right? Like Crystallis. But this is the testing ground. And Nintendo is taking their time. But they've got the great interface anyway. Whether or not it's great and powerful hardware, ultimately that's not going to matter. The powerful hardware is going to come down to the internet connection, not to the actual processing power of the device. And I feel like this is the direction that it's pointing. Okay, that all of this, like especially when you have games available in multiple fashion on the same console, it's because they're looking at the cloud service being the big deal. And they have, remember, Nintendo with the Switch, as much as I love this software, and actually as happy as I am that it doesn't have a camera or a microphone, Nintendo's collecting all data that they possibly can on, well, one of the reasons they knew they could do a Switch Lite. And in fact, Doug Bowser basically admitted this. He literally said it, that he knows most Switch owners are using it in mobile mode. And so the Switch Lite, they had the data to say, oh yeah, people will buy a mobile-only Nintendo Switch because the bulk of the data we have is that people play it in mobile mode. And I believe them, and I think that's absolutely true, and it makes perfect sense. But then that also means that they probably know, what game you're playing, how often you're playing it. I mean, of course they know. Like if you're friends with people on the Switch, which by the way, if you want to be a friend with me on Switch, my Switch code is on my Twitter account at SovereignTech. But anyway, I mean, you know what your friends are playing. You think Nintendo doesn't know? So they probably knew people were playing Crystalis a lot. And so it's like, okay, let's make this hot number, something on Switch Online and start pointing people in that direction. It's going there. It's going that way. Now, all of that said, okay, we've had that conversation. I think overall, the new offerings, those 6 new offerings are fucking brilliant and great overall. Okay. Especially if you don't have the SNK 40th Anniversary Collection. And, really, even if you don't have Kirby Superstar Ultra, I guess it's just as well that you have the version that you can get. I just want to make sure that the improved editions somehow get preserved, and I think that there's going to be a real disconnect if they try to release, an N64 option for Switch Online, and it comes with these really vast, and I mean vastly, they're still great games for what they are, but vastly inferior versions of these games. But regardless, I'm playing the shit out of Nintendo Switch Online. I mean, I really am. I spend more time with the actual games, or, with actual like separate games, but I definitely spend a lot of time on Switch Online. Ellen and I are playing Dr. Mario. I mean, it's such a great time. And again, it's so handy that you just pop off the controllers, whoo, and away you go. All right. Now, something that will probably never, you want to be careful when you say never, but probably never, ever appear on Switch Online or on the Switch at all, unless it's some kind of homebrew affair. This is really interesting, and we still don't know, and this is done right, and it's beautiful. You've got to check this out. You've got to try this. And let me assure you that you can find the ROM for this online, archive.org, or you can find it somewhere. Anyway, I don't know what I just said there. But there is this guy, how long was he working on it? For years. And he's remaining anonymous, which is the right move. And he basically says, this is a direct quote from him. He says, as far as I'm concerned, the project is terminated already. What is this project? What is he talking about? A developer, just one person, made a remastered, and that's putting it mildly, a remastered version of Super Mario Land, which is actually, I think, the first episode of Gaming Grid ever was a complete review of that game. Because talk about perfect games. I think that is an absolutely perfect game. It's a great way to get people into video games because you can beat it so quickly, and yet it has it has some of the complexity, but it's still kind of easy. But then it also has a lot of novelty as far as, some platformers are really straight ahead and they don't change things up much, as to where, let's give credit where it's due, Super Mario Land changes things up. But what this guy developed is, again, a remake more of one of the top games ever made, one of the best-selling games of all time. And of course, originally it's for the Game Boy, but now amazing, and this is so crazy. So it's called New Super Mario Land, okay? And again, the ROM is out there, folks, even though if you look at the story that I linked to in the show notes, it sounds like, because what he did was he meant for it to be a Christmas gift, and he basically got his hands on 30 Super Nintendo cartridges and made 30 copies of this game and sent it out as a very limited Christmas gift. I mean, what an amazing Christmas gift, quite frankly. Really, I couldn't think of a better one. I mean, someone developed a game like just for you, and 30 other or 29 other people. That's pretty remarkable. So, but he gave opportunity. I was reading the story on Nintendo Life. He gave opportunity for the staffers at Nintendo Life to give it a shot, and they were just like, holy shit, this is amazing. Because New Super Mario Land, first off, now the nomenclature there of New Super Mario should remind you of, if you remember on the DS, as well as on the 3DS, and then on the Wii U, and of course later on the Switch, where you had, that's a series, which is New Super Mario Brothers, which is trying to update, graphically at least, but then there's other elements, the gameplay and the series of the original Super Mario Brothers games, okay? Particularly the original Super Mario Brothers. And I'm a big fan of this series, just top-notch games. New Super Mario Brothers and New Super Mario Brothers 2 are two of the finest mobile games you could play in your life. And this somehow looks, I mean, the graphics look exactly like those games, like something off of, at the very least, the DS, like New Super Mario Brothers. But what's even more amazing about that is that while it looks like something off the DS, it's basically a 1 megabyte Super Nintendo ROM. And again, that can fit on a cartridge and it can play on an actual Super Nintendo, or if you have like an analog or a Super Analog NT, right? Oh, it's gorgeous. Now, I got my hands on the ROM. I checked it out, and it has 4-player built into it, so that way it kind of plays like the... actually, I guess maybe that was for the Wii originally. Was it New Super Mario Brothers Wii where they had more of the 4-player action? I mean, this is amazing. This is so cool. Well done game. If you go to the link in the show notes, I mean, there's a really nice short video that Nintendo Life made of them playing it, and you get like an idea. You get to see some of the game. I mean, now granted, remember that Super Mario Land is a very short game. Okay. So it's believable that, the one guy pulled this off and, that it could even be done. But New Super Mario Land, you have got to play this, especially if you've never played Super Mario Land. You are in for an absolute treat. And it does work just gorgeously, just famously on any emulator any Super Nintendo emulator that you throw it at. The controls are tight. Everything just feels so solid on it. And the graphics are stunning. I love that look. Like I said, New Super Mario Brothers and New Super Mario Brothers 2, I'm a big fan of both of those games. I think they're fantastic. And part of that was even though it was a 2D game, kind of the 3-dimensional sheen to it, that, I don't know, it was a cute but very unique and also very updated look. And so to play, Super Mario Land like that with New Super Mario Land, that's just a no-brainer. You got to check this out. So pick this up. There's a link in the show notes if you want to read up more about it. Of course, Super Mario Land was just celebrating its 30th anniversary. So that's another reason that this was being worked on, but fucking brilliant goddamn work. Now, that said, this is something I mentioned. I think I mentioned it on the Zomia 1 Underground Q&A. I don't know if I mentioned it in the actual gaming grid. But I was saying, I was like, somebody must have, because, another thing that came out in September, we were talking about, of course, the SNES Classic, or the SNES Switch Online selection came out in September. The Switch Lite came out in September. I mean, so much great stuff came out in September. One of the other things that came out in September was the Sega Genesis Mini. I still haven't really heard numbers on how this thing is selling, and if it was a wild success, which admittedly I did want it to be, even though I canceled my order on it, okay? And I talked about why in previous episodes. If it was a wild success, I got to believe that they would talk about it. And I really wish it was, because ultimately, I'm not interested. The Sega Genesis Mini, I mean, nice, okay, fine. But of course, what I really want is the Sega Saturn Mini, right? I mean, that's what we're all really hoping for. We're wanting to play some Panzer Dragoon. We're wanting to get Nights into Dreams. We got so much stuff that we'd want to rock on that. And of course, ultimately, we'd love to have a Sega Dreamcast Mini, wouldn't we? Yeah, fuck yes. Hit up some Power Stone 2. I mean, I can think of a million things I would want to rock on that. But I don't know if we're going to end up getting that because I don't know that the Sega Genesis Mini did very well. But one of the things that I'd said, like I said, it was either on a past Gaming Grid or Zombie One Underground episode. I was like, somebody must have gotten the extra ROMs off of that thing, off of the Genesis Mini, because it came with some exclusive games. Some that were never finished, some that were ironically made by, to some degree, made by fans, like Darius. There was the Tetris, right, which was never really released for Genesis. There were some unique games for it, and not only that, but I ended up looking a little deeper into this, and and I hadn't really considered this, but some of the games for the Genesis Mini that were brought over to the U.S. got proper, shall we say, U.S. Translations and encoding. Okay, so that made them worthwhile. Like, ultimately, the ROMs that you could get off of, even of games that there have already been ROMs for the Genesis for, decades. Okay, the ROMs for the Genesis Mini are really the best versions, in many ways, of these games. And turns out, so I went looking and I was able to find where people shared like the couple new games, right? Like Darius and Tetris. Okay. But then I ended up just finding where, and you can find this too, folks. I'm not going to link to it in the show notes, but you can find this too. I ended up finding where somebody did just a full ROM dump from the Genesis Mini. And so they put, every game from the Genesis Mini is on there. Landstalker, and all the different versions too. They did a great ripping job. And some of these games never really saw the light of day in the US. One of those, of course, being Mega Man: The Wily Wars. And so you're getting a full-on US translation and edition that just was never available. So it's really worthwhile to get your hands on all of the ROMs that were in the Sega Genesis Mini, not just Darius and Tetris, okay, or Wily Wars, but actually all of them. And I can tell you they are out there, and they do play great. I didn't notice like any dramatic differences, but if you're a purist of a type, this is worthwhile doing. Certainly, the Genesis version of Tetris was really cool. I like that a lot. I don't think anything's ever going to beat the NES version of that, which is basically what all the Tetris competitions use. Or it's not going to be Tetris 99, which, what a fucking great game that is. All right. The game I probably play the most on my Switch is Tetris 99. I love that so much. Between that and Mortal Kombat 11, it's nonstop. And Power Rangers Battle for the Grid. That game's so cool. But anyway, you're going to want to get your hands on all these ROMs. I can tell you that they are all out there. Darius plays awesome. Like I said, Tetris is awesome. Mega Man: The Wily Wars is a lot of fun. I really wish that was included on a Legacy collection, like we mentioned earlier for Mega Man, but it wasn't. That's fine. We've got it here. Clearly the best way to play this would be on, what did they call the damn thing? The Mega Drive SG, right? I get the names confused because there's the system the Analog brought out that was the Genesis replica, which is gorgeous. But then there was the cartridge that we talked about. Oh, was that the MT? There was the cartridge that can actually play. It can go into your Genesis and it can emulate Sega CD, right? But it can also emulate the rest of Sega's catalog from the Sega CD down. I think was that able to play 32X? Listen back to previous Gaming Grids and I covered it because I want one of these things so fucking bad, but they cost like $250. But if you pop these Genesis Mini ROMs on there, you're in for a great time. These are some of the best games ever made. Holy shit. But that's another thing too, where you have the Genesis Classics collection on Switch, and I picked that up during a sale, for like $10, and you basically get like 50-60 of the greatest fucking games ever made. It was just more of a reason why I didn't get the Genesis Mini. And then there's the Sega Ages collection, where, in fact, that's interesting. The games available Little side note, the game's available on the Genesis Classics collection for the Switch. It is different than on any other console. And I think the reason is because Nintendo gets the exclusive Sega Ages games. And I've noticed, minus Sonic the Hedgehog, games released for Sega Ages aren't on the Sega Classics collection, even though one came long before the others. That was pretty clearly on purpose. And if there's some game on there that you're thinking like, fuck, why didn't they put this on there? It's probably because it's going to get a Sega Ages release sooner or later. And talk about another series that I hope is selling really well. I really hope that Sega Ages series is doing some serious money, because fuck, what they did with Phantasy Star was stunning. Virtua Racer still plays so hot. You can't... At some point I'll do a review of Virtua Racer, because you cannot overstate how important this game was to video gaming in general, and particularly into getting into 3D and getting people used to polygons. I mean, it is just such a revolutionary game. It's so cool that we get to play that now on a console, real deal. But anyway, let's wrap this baby up. So we've got I want to wrap it up with one more story, but we covered all of that. You've got plenty of stuff to check out. If you have a Switch, you've got all new games to play on Switch Online. We do have a delay on the Zero ZX series, but, what are you going to do? When they come out, it's going to be, performing at its best, hopefully. You can check out New Super Mario Land for, get the ROM for your SNES. Then you've got all those Sega Genesis mini ROMs to pick up. But now here's a game that if I were to review, I'd instantly give it a 10 out of 10. I think this game is fucking genius. I am so passionate about this game. In fact, it is supposed to... Here's an interesting thing. This game is supposed to come out for consoles. Right now, it's only available for Windows and Linux. Okay? But it's supposed to come out for even the Switch. And I wonder if... Because there's a lot of scandal around this game, and I wonder if that's holding off, because it was supposed to come out end of 2019. Well, folks, in case you haven't looked at your calendar, we are in the last days of 2019. We are about to enter a new decade. Ironically, this game it comes out basically 20 years after the last game that used the build engine ended up getting released, which I think was that World War II GI or something like that in 99. But in 2019, we got a new game from 3D Realms. Of course, granted, 3D Realms, that name has changed hands a lot. But regardless, 3D Realms came out with a new build engine game. Now, the build engine, if you're not familiar, is the very engine that Duke Nukem 3D was made on, that Blood was made on, that Shadow Warrior is made on. Basically, the greatest shooters of all time, minus Doom, were built on the build engine. No pun intended there. And this game is fucking awesome. I mean, I instantly give it a 10 out of 10. Absolutely. Now, this game originally, here's a little bit of funny history. So the game right now, as it is known as Ion Fury. That was not its original name. When it was originally getting released, when it was originally announced, it was called Ion Maiden. Okay. Now, there's a scandal around that, but that's not the only scandal around this game. Ion Maiden is actually what a crazy history. So, longtime listeners of Sovereign Tech, people who know me, know that I am a huge fan of none other than Duke Nukem. I am one of those people who proudly states, and I think that it's absolutely true, I proudly state that Duke Nukem Forever on PC is a great game. I mean, again, I get it that on the Xbox 360 and whatever other system, the load times are horrendous, blah, 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 blah. No, you're not going to get any argument from me. But then also, if you're not playing this with keyboard and mouse, what the fuck are you doing? Okay, as far as with Duke Nukem Forever. I think it's a great game. Now, you got to rewind to, like 2013, 2014, okay? And at that time, there was a web page set up for this. There was going to be this huge announcement and it appeared there was going to be a new Duke Nukem game. And of course, me, the man of tomorrow, very excited about this. And like you go to this website. I don't even remember exactly what the website was, but the clock ticks down and it gets announced that basically there's going to be like a Duke Nukem RPG. And I'm like, well, that's going to be great. And I don't mean the RPG is in the rocket launcher. I mean, as in a role-playing game. And I was totally on board with this. That announcement hits. Everybody seems to talk about it a little bit. And then suddenly, for whatever goddamn reason, because this is being made by 3D Realms, which I think at the time was more or less under Gearbox. I don't know where the arguments with these studios come in and who owns what. Ultimately, to me, it doesn't matter, other than, I just want more games. And I guess these kind of, these IP arguments, which a lot of this is going to come down to, these IP arguments keep shit from getting made. And what a pain in the fucking ass. Intellectual property, copyright, you know what I mean? So we thought we were all going to get a Duke Nukem RPG. Then we find out, no, about a year later, because we don't hear anything. And then about a year later, it gets announced, actually, there's going to be that we're making this game called Bombshell. And they're reskinning what was going to be, I guess, effectively Duke Nukem RPG. Bombshell would eventually come out in 2016 with this character, who also happens to be the same character that's in Ion Fury. That being, was it Shelley Bombshell Harrison, something like that. So we get Bombshell, it comes out in 2016, that game. And I get it. I mean, I have it. I get it. It's not that great a game. And would it have been better if Duke was there? Yeah, because Duke Nukem's personality can take a mediocre game and, turn it up to 11, right? Just because of his character and personality, something that otherwise would have been, who cares? It just brings it to another level. That's one of the powers, really, of Duke Nukem. But instead, it's this Bombshell game, and it just kind of comes and goes. And people talk about it. Yeah, it's a pretty weak game. Yeah, there's this problem, blah, blah, blah. And we kind of move on. But then amazingly, and for whatever reason, and I'm still confused by this, and I'm guessing there's got to be some argument around the IP for Duke Nukem. Because we can get the Duke Nukem edition of Bulletstorm for some reason, but we can't get and we can get the 20th anniversary re-release of Duke Nukem, but we can't get an actual new Duke Nukem game, which would have made all the sense in the world for what Ion Fury would be, which is basically a first-person shooter in a classic style with some updated tricks using the build engine. Who wouldn't make a Duke Nukem game, a new one like that? Well, for whatever reason, it doesn't get made. And I'm sure that comes down to some kind of copyright law or some kind, somebody else owns the franchise, somebody else owns the IP. I don't know. Ironically, in Ion Fury, the main villain is actually voiced by John St. John, who does the voice of Duke Nukem. So, again, whatever. Why this couldn't just be a Duke Nukem game, I don't know. Make it a female Duke Nukem. I mean, that's basically what Bombshell, what the character of Bombshell is, what she is, but make it more blatant. I don't know. I don't get it. Anyway, this game is really, really great. I mean, it's really great. And the reviews, when it initially came out, I guess back in August, I think it first came out, the reviews were through the roof. I mean, it's positive. Everybody, like on Steam, all the reviews are, holy shit, this thing's amazing. This is so much fun. Saying I feel like a kid again, blah, 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 which, boy, I could talk about that. I get so tired of, I'm recapturing my childhood. I have issues there. I mean, I don't know why a game... All right, let me talk about it for just 1 second, so that way nobody confuses me. This is my question. Why can't a game actually that's made like it's something out of the 90s or out of the 80s, or a movie that is made like something out of the 70s, 80s, or 90s, why can't it just be a good movie made in that style? Why does it have to be? It's only valid. It's only validity as far as being good is because it appeals to your childhood or something. Like, can't a game just be great? Who cares if it's made like it's from the 90s? Fuck nostalgia. Is it a good game or not? And I think a lot of games, I mean, I get it when there are games that literally play, or movies that purposely play off of nostalgia, but I don't see any reason why you can't just make shit that's made like it was back then, but it's just great now. I really get to, I mean, as a Star Wars fan, and I am, the amount of times that recapturing my childhood and all this shit, that kind of argument gets levied against me as a Star Wars fan is fucking insulting. I grew up. Star Wars grew up with me. Okay? Like, it really grew up with me. Just read the fucking Thrawn trilogy, the original Thrawn trilogy that Timothy Zahn wrote. There's all kinds of things I could point at you to show you. Star Wars fucking grew up with me. We were not stuck in some, we're not in some state of arrested development or anything. It grew up with me. I am not looking to recapture the Star Wars of my childhood. I want the Star Wars that I have grown up with over 30 years. If I have to read one more Forbes piece or whatever fucking media outlet wants to say, it's like, oh, this is to recapture their childhoods, or if I had to read on Twitter somebody talking about recapturing, no. You either grew up with it and allowed the content to grow up with you, or your understanding to grow up with you. Okay? Or yeah, then I get it. If you're not doing that, then I totally understand. Right? You are in a state of arrested development. Like, you are just stuck in, I want the warm fuzzies from when I was a kid. But I hate to break it to you. There are lots of people who, a lot of these franchises, again, sure, they don't know what they are. Like, some asshat from Forbes has no idea, about any of this shit. They don't know that other stuff was made besides movies or whatever game or something like this. They have no fucking clue. But they've got to stop this argument, because these franchises really did grow up with us. Okay, in many ways. I mean, it's just like, consider the Clone Wars, right, with Star Wars. I promise I won't stay on this, okay? But I'm just saying, like, with the Clone Wars, the Star Wars. Yeah, first couple seasons, no question, that's for kids. Okay, that is meant for a very young audience. But what did the writers and directors and everybody else involved with Clone Wars know? What did the producers know? Well, those kids that started watching it in 2005 or whatever, well, by the time we get to season 5, those kids are teenagers now. How about we try to appease our built-in audience that has been following us for years? Doesn't that make sense? Of course that makes sense. And so what happens when you get to season 5? Suddenly you've got, again, as I've said many times about the Clone Wars, suddenly by season 5, you've got one of the highest body counts this side of RoboCop and Hot Shots Part 2. Because, newsflash, this isn't about making us feel like we're kids and giving us the warm fuzzies. It's about growing up with us. But whatever, the fucking news media is a bunch of goddamn idiots anyway. I said I wasn't going to get all heated. I wasn't going to get riled up on Gaming Grid. But I needed to say that at some point, and I'm just so sick of it. I am so sick of being accused of being in a state of arrested development. Look, if the shit stayed childish, I wouldn't keep on watching it. It's got to grow up with me. It's got to appeal to me as a fucking adult. And guess what? There is plenty in most of these franchises that appeals to me as a fucking adult. Okay? And certainly anything related to Duke Nukem in even the most remotest fashion certainly does. So anyway, Ion Fury, great fucking game. Great game. 10 out of 10. Absolutely. But it comes with controversy. One part is kind of it's just horseshit across the board, and I hate to admit it. But the band, a band that I am a big fan of, the band Iron Maiden is actually sued 3D Realms over the name of the game, because again, it was originally Ion Maiden. Now it's Ion Fury. Understand something about Iron Maiden. Because I think people want to just come out and say, fuck Bruce Dickinson, and just go down the list of the guys. Well, fuck him and fuck him and fuck him, and fuck Eddie and whatever. They have whole legal teams, okay? Bruce Dickinson is not sitting on the internet, on Google. In fact, I guarantee you he's not doing that. I mean, I debate whether or not he even has a smartphone. And he is not typing into Google, okay, what sounds like Iron Maiden? No, there are legal teams that are on basically on autopilot, as well as the record companies that are constantly hunting this shit down. Now, you can say, can the band come out and say, hey, no, we think that one's fine? Yeah, they could, and I get that, okay? And again, really, ultimately, fuck Iron Maiden, because it's all part of that machine, right, with this? Even though, yeah, I still listen to their music. Yep, I probably still see them in concert, okay? I mean, let's be clear here, okay? Before, know where to point the fingers, okay? And be clear on this, that the record companies ultimately, can have a lot of the say on this. And that's who I really blame. I don't necessarily blame Bruce Dickinson, okay? I ultimately blame the record companies because they're probably trying to protect their investment in some way. Anyway, so yeah, I mean, that was bullshit, and so they had to change the name. It's ridiculous. Their argument was, in my opinion, fallacious. Like it didn't make any sense. It was a very, very weak argument, but whatever. And I mean, and it's not like, Iron Maiden, they made a video game, didn't they? I think Iron Maiden and Queensryche were the two bands in the 90s that had come out with PC games. So it's not like Iron Maiden's new to this. I mean, and granted, this is not the first time that Iron Maiden has laid down, or that the machine that is Iron Maiden has laid down the band hammer, that they have laid down the IP hammer, I guess I should say. Like there was that series that was going to come out from Aspen Comics, was Iron and the Maiden, and they had to change the name of that to like the Iron Saint or some bullshit. I mean, like the Iron Maiden has done this before, but again, I don't like it. I'm an anarchist. Fuck intellectual property. I don't need it. I don't care about it. I don't want anything to do with it. And it's so crazy because, we all know, or not, we should all know, that when the concept of copyright law originally was implemented, it was only meant to hold copyright for like 14 years. It was never meant to turn into, what is it now, 70 something years? Maybe it's 100. I mean, and I think actually recently it just went up. It's some stupid, everybody's trying to hold on to it into perpetuity. It's gotten ridiculously out of hand, even if you think IP is somehow a legitimate thing, which I don't. But anyway, Iron Maiden stepped in on this. They ended up changing it to Ion Fury. I think that's crap, because clearly they were naming the game Ion Maiden. They knew what they were doing. They knew they were referencing Iron Maiden. I don't think that's untrue. They were referencing it, but that was clearly out of respect. And to say, yeah, this is a game with a metal attitude, and when you play Ion Fury, you better fucking believe it does have that attitude, and it's fucking brilliant, like I said. But then there was some other controversy around this game. And I put a link in the show notes that talks about some of that. I was going to cover it, but we're already running long. I'm not going to get into it here. I am going to simply leave you with this, though. While you can make, and Ion Fury is not a form of activism, okay? But while you can make games that are a form of activism, I've done that myself, Zomi Offline Games. Literally the first company to ever put out games that are anarchist at heart, openly, on major platforms, okay? And I know I'm the first, and I am going to hold on to that. I'm never going to die, but if I was, you could pop that on my tombstone, baby. First developer of the first anarchist video games. You bet your goddamned ass. Anyway, they were on a major platform. I mean, you never know who made what, where, when, back in the day, and put it out on some indie thing. But regardless, while games can be a form of activism, attacking games is no activism. It's just not. You're not striking at any root, okay? You're not, while it can be easily argued that almost everybody plays video games today, let's be clear here. Most people, they're playing Candy Crush, Clash of Clans, or whatever these dumbass, and they are dumbass games, okay? They're just Skinner boxes, or worse. Okay, nobody's like really paying attention to these games in any deep way. All right, there is a very small niche of people that actually pay attention to games as the high art that they are. But that is a niche that there's not a whole lot of point to trying to push your varying agendas and woke agendas and whatever the fuck else on. I mean, there's not a point to it. Okay. I mean, when I push in my games, and I do, when anarchism gets pushed in that, understand that me as an anarchist, okay, and I am, if you only ever listen to Gaming Grid, I mean, I imagine most people who listen to Gaming Grid also listen to Sovereign Tech, so they already know that I'm an anarchist. But when I push anarchism, like, I always know that it's always going to be a subset. However, people that go after, again, I'm trying to be very, very quick with this because we're already running into overtime. The concerns around homophobia and other things and a lack of wokeness on the part of the developers for Ion Fury. Okay? Going after this and just pissing off, you're not striking the root. You are not. I get what you're going after, and I don't disagree with what you're trying to normalize and get out there and trying to, get recognition, acceptance, and so much more. I am so with you. You know I am, okay? Total feminist ally here. I'm with you, but this is an absolute waste of time for Twitter activists and whatever other kind of crap. These are not the people you need to be bothering with. Your goals are for a very widespread acceptance. Going after a niche community in gaming there's just no point. Now, if you are trying to create pocket anarchist communities or pocket communities that live outside of civilization as we understand it, I know I'm getting into a much deeper subject than the Gaming Grid should. Okay, then trying to get your message out there, writing books for that kind of community and so on. I mean, like then that makes sense, right? Or making games or whatever for that. I mean, that makes sense. Like, when people make these hentai games and visual novels and whatever, they're dating simulators and all that stuff. Nobody that makes those has any intention of being million sellers of their games because they know their audience, the size of it, who they're going to reach. They know they're not going to get everybody. Okay. And so what I'm telling you is that if you want to do activism against parts of society that don't make you feel accepted as whatever way your freak flag flies, and I say that with absolute love and respect, this is not the place. You are wasting your fucking time going after these people, and you're really just not you, okay, because you didn't create the problem, but it's creating a bunch of hubbub that isn't going to change shit. Pick other battles. You got to pick your battles. You can't win them all. You can't fight them all. So pick, in my opinion, just pick other battles. I thought and you can look at the link in the show notes. The stuff that I read, I mean, yeah, fuck the developer or a couple of the developers anyway. Understand it's a team and not everybody, it's the people that make a game are not some monolithic entity. All right. It's not EA, there's more than one opinion involved there. And I just thought the whole thing was just like, and it ultimately it's creating fodder for, news organizations that make money off of a nonstop ideological battle. I want to get into the subject, but really we are running well into overtime, and I don't want to spend it, and I just don't want to do it. And the Gaming Grid is really not the place for this conversation. Okay, at least not in my opinion. Maybe you think it is. But like with Gamergate, so many news organizations, they just thrived off of that. And I still, to this day, stand by the idea that while the death threats, I think, were real, a lot of aspects of it were real. There's a lot of it that was done by sock accounts created by news organizations themselves. Because suddenly gaming websites were getting traffic that they've never encountered before, because you're getting so many people that were wondering, like, oh, what's this Gamergate thing? And I think that, a lot of times I think news organizations make news, as in they create it, they falsify it, or they blow it up out of proportions just to get clicks. And this is a community, this is an area where I think the Twitterverse and whatever social media activists, Facebook activists, whatever, where you are absolutely wasting your fucking time because nothing is going to change. out of going after these developers, going after this game, and go after some of these game companies. I mean, you want to go, maybe go after EA. Maybe that's a little bit broader. I don't know, but I just think you're wasting your time. Okay? Not saying you're wrong. I'm saying I think you're wasting your time, and you got to consider that. If you want to fight battles, okay, cultural battles in Civilization, here's how you do it. You know how you do it? You don't tear down. You don't attack. You don't do anything like that. You straight up, you make the games that are the change you want to see in the world, right? That's what I did. And that's what I recommend you do. Put your money where your mouth is. Don't just complain and go after these guys. Make the better games. And you can. We live in an amazing world where technology is so democratized. And this is the part where it is amazing. But technology is so democratized. In fact, I even just saw RPG Maker MV's coming out for the Switch. Like, you're going to be able to make games on the fucking console. That's insane. Make the games that you want to see and that give you the acceptance, representation, and visibility, and so on that you want. And I want it for you too. Do that. Don't do this social media activism horseshit and create stories that just gives clicks and incentivizes these news organizations to foment more bullshit, okay, in the gaming community. And this goes far beyond the gaming community. Just don't do it. So that's it. I'm going to wrap this baby up. This has been the Gaming Grid. You might get another one before the end of December, even though I know we only have a couple days left. But we'll wrap this baby up, and I will see all of you, on the other side.
Game over.